Imagine standing at your dying brother's bedside, watching your own nephew slide documents across the tray, smiling like it's just paperwork. A $700,000 lake cabin, a $400,000 life insurance policy, decades of savings, all about to vanish with a single signature. But one old woman you barely knew whispered 3 words that changed everything. Don't sign anything. What happened next destroyed the nephew's perfect plan and delivered justice no one saw coming. This is that story. If you've ever been betrayed by family, the people who were supposed to love you most, stick with me. This one hits different. Like, subscribe, and drop where you're watching from in the comments. I read every single one. Let's get into it. My name is Owen Hartwich. I'm 63 years old. Spent 38 years dispatching freight trucks out of Tucson. I'm the guy who still balances his checkbook every Sunday, who reads every line of fine print, who stands at the gas pump for 20 minutes deciding if a $4 car wash is worth it. I never thought I was the kind of man who could be played, until the call came that my older brother Hollis was dying. I drove 11 straight hours from Tucson to a hospice in Boise. The place smelled like lavender, trying and failing to hide the truth. When I walked past the room across from Hollis's, an old woman in a wheelchair watched me. She didn't speak that first day, but on the 4th night, at 2 a.m., she was waiting in her dark doorway like a ghost. "Whatever your nephew tells you when he gets here," she whispered, "don't believe a word of it. Drive home tonight if you can." I told myself she was just a lonely, medicated old lady projecting her own pain. That was my first mistake. Hollis had been more father than brother to me. When our dad walked out in 1968, Hollis was 12 and I was 8. He taught me how to throw a curveball, how to shave, how to be a man. Pancreatic cancer had reduced him to 90 pounds, but his mind was still sharp enough to be terrified. He kept asking for his son Cale. Cale, my nephew, the boy I'd taught to bait a hook on Lake Coeur d'Alene when he was 7. Cale arrived the next morning in a charcoal jacket, smelling like airport coffee and confidence. He hugged me a beat too long. Then he sat with his father, saying all the right things, while Hollis looked at me with wet eyes, like he wanted to warn me but couldn't. Later, in the cafeteria, Cale laid it out. "Dad wants me to handle the cabin in Coeur d'Alene. The quitclaim deed. Needs your signature as witness this afternoon. Notary's coming. Bryony's not in the will for the cabin. That was settled years ago. The cabin Hollis built with his own hands. Lakefront. Worth north of $700,000. I felt Mrs. Pembley's warning crawl up my spine. I asked to see the papers. Cale smiled, that calm, reasonable smile, and said he'd rather spare me the legal stress. Red flag. That afternoon the notary arrived. Cale was all charm. I insisted on reading every page. Quitclaim deed, okay. But underneath, a full power of attorney giving. Cale total control over Hollis's finances immediately. And a change of beneficiary form switching the $400,000. Union life insurance from Bryony to Cale. The room got ice cold. "Cale," I said quietly, "what are these other 2 documents?" He had an answer for everything. Protective measures. Bryony agreed. Dad owes me money anyway. I looked at my brother on the bed, glassy eyes, silently crying, and something in me snapped. I sent the notary out. Closed the door. "Call your sister. Speakerphone. Now." Cale tried to talk me down. I dialed Bryony myself. When she answered and had no idea what I was talking about, the mask finally slipped. Cale's face changed. The nephew I knew disappeared. Something cold and calculating stared back at me. "Get out of this room." He gathered his papers and left without another word. I sat on the edge of Hollis's bed, took his trembling hand, and said, "It's all right, brother." I stopped it. He squeezed my hand once. He passed 31 hours later. Bryony made it in time. Cale did not. After the funeral, Bryony and I met with Hollis's longtime lawyer, Marjorie Kestrel. The real will was crystal clear. Cabin sold and split 50-50ths between Cale and Bryony. Life insurance to Bryony. Savings divided 3 ways. with a portion to a scholarship fund at Hollis's old trade school. Cale's documents would have stolen almost everything. Marjorie asked where I found the instinct to question it. I told her about the old woman across the hall. I drove back to Boise the next Saturday with pastries and a handwritten card. Mrs. Esther Pemberley had passed 2 days earlier. The nurse gave me an envelope she'd left for me. A soft music. Inside was a single sheet in shaky handwriting. Mr. Hartwich, I had a son named Tomlin. He took everything in 2009. The house, the savings, my wedding rings. I ended up alone. No one warned me. My sister-in-law knew and stayed silent. That day I swore, if I ever saw a happening again, I would speak. It would be my place. I hope you listened. Sincerely, Esther Pemberley. I sat on that bench in the cold November air for a long time. A stranger, dying herself, chose to speak when it wasn't her business. That choice saved my brother's last wishes. Saved my niece from losing $500,000 in the worst week of her life. Emotional swell. Cale tried to fight it at first. He contested the will. Spread stories that I was confused and emotional. But the notary's statement, the phone recording Bryony and I had, and Marjorie's documentation buried him. The estate settled exactly as Hollis wanted. Bryony got the security she and her kids needed. The scholarship fund was established. Cale got nothing extra. But the real revenge wasn't financial. It was watching Cale realize that the old man he thought he could manipulate, the retired truck dispatcher who reads fine print, had stopped him cold. It was knowing that Esther Pemberley's voice echoed, louder from the grave than his. Greed ever could. Deeper storytelling pace begins, expanding with rich detail. Let me take you back to those hospice nights so you can feel what I felt. The hum of the oxygen concentrator. The smell of antiseptic and cafeteria coffee. The way Hollis's hand felt like dry paper in mine. The fear in his eyes every time Cale's name came up. I replayed every family barbecue. Every Christmas. Every time I'd defended. Cale when Bryony said he was always looking for the angle. I'd brushed it off. Blood is blood, right? Mrs. Pemberley's warning kept replaying too. At 2 a.m., voice barely above a whisper, grey eyes sharp as broken glass. She didn't have to say anything. She was days from her own end. But she rolled her wheelchair into that doorway anyway. When Cale walked in that morning, I wanted so badly to believe him. The hug, the concern in his voice. The logical explanation about probate eating everything. It sounded reasonable. Until I saw that second and third document. Until I watched his eyes go flat when I pushed back. The moment I told him to get out. That was the turning point. My hands were shaking. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it over the oxygen machine. But I stood my ground for my brother. For Bryony. For the man Hollis had been. Cale's final look before he left the room, that cold calculation, told me everything. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was who he had become. Building tension. The days after the funeral were brutal. Cale tried calling Bryony, trying to gaslight her. Dad was confused. Uncle Owen misunderstood. Bryony played the speakerphone recording for him. Silence on the other end. Then rage. Then threats about family reputation. Marjorie, the lawyer, was a force. She documented everything. The notary backed us up completely. Cale's protective measures looked exactly like what they were, a deathbed swindle. When the final settlement came through, Bryony cried in my truck in the parking lot of the lawyer's office. Not just for the money, for the proof that her father hadn't abandoned her. Even at the end. Cale disappeared from family life after that. Last I heard he was still in Spokane, still in insurance, still spinning whatever story made him the victim. But we all know the truth. Reflective, slower pace. I think about Esther Pemberley every single day. A woman who lost everything to her own son and still chose to protect a stranger. She taught me that sometimes not my place is the most dangerous excuse in the world. If you're watching this and you see something wrong in your own family, financial manipulation, elder abuse, quiet greed, I hope Esther's story gives you courage. Speak up. It might be exactly your place. Expanding emotional layers, internal monologue sections. There were nights I lay awake in that hospice chair wondering if I was being paranoid. If I was destroying my relationship with my only nephew over an old woman's paranoia. Then I'd look at Hollis's face and remember every sacrifice he made for me after. Dad left. The way he worked 2 jobs so I could finish school. The way he never missed a single one of my Little League games. No, I wasn't being paranoid. I was being loyal. The revenge wasn't loud. There were no screaming. Matches in the street or public. Humiliations, though part of me wanted that. It was quiet. It was legal. It was final. It was Cale realizing that dumb old uncle had seen right through him when it mattered most. The sweetest moment came months later when Bryony called me. She'd run into Cale at a distant cousin's wedding. He tried to act normal. She looked him dead in the eye and said, Dad's wishes were honored. Thanks to Uncle Owen. He couldn't hold her gaze. That was the real justice. Not the money. The exposure. The shame. The knowledge that his mask was ripped off in the one place he thought he was safest. At his own father's deathbed. 39:00. Wrap up. Family betrayal cuts deeper than anything. But standing up, even when your voice shakes, can rewrite the ending. Esther Pemberley didn't get her own justice. But through one brave act, she helped deliver ours. That's the power of choosing to speak. 40:00. If this story lit a fire in you, smash that like button. Subscribe for more raw, emotional revenge stories inspired by real life. Drop your own family betrayal or justice story in the comments. I read them all. And if you're going through something similar right now, you're not alone. 41:00. Click the next video on screen for another tale of betrayal and hard-won justice. Thanks for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.